we talk about the interesting parts of AI, we think of things like this. We had good morning. My name is Martecchini. I'm the president. We're talking today a little bit about the state of Webb. We had a breakfast this morning at the president's house for a group that's going to be connecting with the parents about supporting the Webb mission. And one of the things we started off with was telling stories about connections. And the world of Webb is very much about connecting. Within the student body itself, connecting, eventually reaching out to connect with the larger world of shipping and ship design and shipbuilding through networking events that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I had my own little story I didn't tell this morning, I'll tell it now. So we had a talk on Monday from two representatives from Electric Boat. Electric Boat is a big shipyard in Rhode Island and Connecticut. Well, the main facility is in Connecticut, but they have another one in Rhode Island. And there's about 20,000 employees, so it's one of the two major submarine builders in the US. The other one being Newport News down in Virginia. And there were two representatives that came to speak about Electric Boat. The older of the two gentlemen was Sean Heron's father. He works up at Electric Boat. And the other one was Brendan Carr. So I'm chatting with them before the presentation. I remembered the name, so I introduced myself, Brendan Carr. I said, what year are you? Because they're both, he was an alumnus of Webb. He was a 2007 graduate. So I said, oh, you must have known my son Nico while you were here. And then he told me the story of how they went for a regatta, a big boat regatta, like many of you might have seen the race this morning off of Glen Cove. And they were racing off of Stamford, and the spinnaker pole came unmoored somehow. It fell down on my son's forehead, opened a big gash. So I met Rick and Brendan, I didn't remember it then, at the Stamford Hospital as he was going in to get stitched up in the race. So he told me the story, I had totally forgotten that. So this is a little bit of connections that you don't think about, but are very much the fabric of what we have here. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about Webb's World. We have 105 students today, or this semester, 23% of them being women. We have 16 faculty. We now have 11 full-time faculty. We are joined by Andrew Lockman, who I think you might have met at the August move-in date. He's our newest professor. Joined us after a career working in the industry and bringing all of his knowledge to us here. And also some adjuncts, which we typically have between 4 and 5 adjuncts every year, or every semester. And they change from semester to semester depending on the content of the courses. There are 3 sophomores in UK this semester, and one of the parents was telling the story. I guess they start around the 3rd week in September, but they go around Labor Day to the UK and spend a few weeks basically traveling around Europe. So a great opportunity to see a bit of the world which is afforded by that semester abroad. There's a winter internship program, of course you know about. We haven't yet started up for the specifics, although some of the juniors and seniors have already started reaching out to industry contacts to land the kind of job for the winter that they would like to get. The shipyard and ship cadet positions are still not yet going. I think those will probably start in October sometime when we get the full lists in from the employers. And of course, we still have the strong placement rate for students after they graduate from Webb, either in the industry or going into a graduate program, whatever their wish is in their own career development. Even more so today, I think I mentioned in August about the push from Washington, both in terms of executive orders and the Congress passing legislation to develop the U.S. shipbuilding industry. I think it's a long road. I think a lot of work has to be done there. One thing we are doing is participating in various initiatives to estimate what is the demand for naval architects in 5 and 10 years. You've heard about AI. AI is going to be improving or making advances, if you will, in terms of what can be done with a given amount of workforce. It'll make them more productive for sure. So you hear about in some industries, in particular computer programming, that cutbacks in computer programming resulting as a result of AI. But even the study done by BCG, Boston Consulting Group, had shown that for naval architects, we're in a deficit and would continue to be so, even with developments in AI, which you might expect to come. So those are all very interesting and important trends that we're looking at. We're retaining our position with Princeton Review of one of the well-qualified schools in the stratosphere, if you will, amongst American universities. And finally, some things happening on campus. You met in August, I think most of you, the relatively new, she joined us in February of this year, Natalie Cotier, who is the new admissions person. She's off doing admissions, going, I think she's in Virginia this week, and then she's going to be hitting Texas, at some point going to California as well, to make connections with guidance counselors, get the Webb brand known out there. One of our important tasks is to become known throughout the U.S. I mean, my goal is that every bright high school STEM student should know about Webb and choose not to go. A very high standard, if you will. But I think that the problem today more and more is that it's just that we are in a media saturated environment today. Big colleges spend millions on advertising. Tough for us to be heard in that environment. But I think today more and more you see, even in other very well-known colleges, the employment value point that we do give, in terms of placement afterwards, is something that many other colleges can't provide today. They don't have the internships, they don't have the industry connections. You don't come out of the school hitting the ground running, which we do. And so we do sell that very much in what we are about here at Webb. Our freshman retention rate is 93%. So that's going from freshman to sophomore year. Our graduation rate is 85%, and that's how many of the initial class eventually will graduate. So basically, if you're making it through the first year, it's not guaranteed that you're going to make it, but that often can be the roughest part in getting started. Life away from home, Dr. Golubeva, things like this. A very important point too, math is the language of engineering. If you learn that well, then your life afterwards becomes much easier. The sophomores, of course, in August, I think while we were having the orientation talk here, they were at Fort Schuyler, that's just down by the Throgs Bridge, doing the IMO STCW course, that's Standards for Training, Certification, and Watchkeeping. Everyone that goes on board a ship today, it's pretty much de rigueur that if you're sailing on board, you have that certification, and they have that now, including the firefighting. They put on the flotation suits, they jump in the water to know how to don flotation suits. They know about shipboard safety routines, they know about mustering points when you go to a lifeboat. All of the important things about being safe on board ships. And I think we talked about that also at the breakfast today. I think the parents here are primarily freshmen, and they won't, of course, be going on a ship this year, but when you come to sophomore year, there are so many programs to provide safety that also the people on board ships very much focused on that, that it's not something that you should be worrying about. When I went to sea in the 1970s, a bit of a different environment back then, but through the 1990s and 2000s, there was a big shift in the shipping industry to increase the safety, and we have all kinds of programs on board ship that focus on that. So rest assured that is very much a strong program and something that the students are aware of and everybody on board ship is also aware of. We have a grant from the Bailey Foundation to do a marine engineering lab. We're changing that a little bit. We're going to be putting a buoy off of the pier, and that's going to be a data sensing buoy, and we're going to start to collect data on currents and so on, preparatory to installing some electricity generation devices, experimental things here. To do a little bit new technology, students can get to work with those things as well. This is all about pushing the boundary of innovation and creativity in new techniques, new technologies. And the Booth Ferris Grant, we are rebuilding our website. We're in a process now of actually evaluating a change to the logo. You see the logo, we've had this since the late 1950s. There's a lot of, shall we say, people have strong opinions about it, as they always do with branding when you look at that. We're not going to make a huge shift. It's going to be evolutionary, not revolutionary. And we still have to get the board to accept it. But I do think, you see an anchor there. That anchor is you last saw in 1870. So I think we're maybe due for an upgrade in our anchor. Let's see. Student life, of course, you're starting to hear, I guess, from your students about all these activities on campus. I mean, the list is long and it changes all the time, to be honest. Of course, when it comes to sports, sailing is probably the one we are most visible in. We have a lot of very good sailors that have come here. Obviously, the connection with boats is a strong one. Quite a few of the students, I am one of them from years back, wanted to study yacht design. It's something you can do. It's not an easy industry to get into, but it can be something that people very much would like to do. A new one this year I see is, well, or I think actually started last year, was pickleball. We seem to have an active pickleball group that's running on campus. They've set up a court on the tennis courts. There's a ski trip that takes place in March when everyone comes back. The boat show, I think all the freshmen went, fortunately, on Thursday this year. So they were here for the social on Friday. For the last 2 years, what happened was they went to the boat show on the same day as the social. And because of traffic in Long Island, didn't show up until after all the events, and parents were unhappy, so we shifted. We listened to you. That's a good thing to do. We have women at Webb. They have some new sweatshirts and other gear that they put out, very nice logos and so on. I've got SNAME, Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers. The seniors go to that this year. It's in Norfolk, Virginia. OTC is the Offshore Technology Conference. The juniors go to that, and they will do that in the spring. I think it's in May. SWE, that's a Society of Women Engineers. Again, the juniors will go to that, and I believe this year it's in New Orleans. And I mentioned an etiquette dinner. That's something that Lori and I run together with the chair of our board, John LaBerge, and his wife, Deborah. We have all the students, and we run through a little bit about how do you do a formal dinner when you're going out to, for example, an interview, or you're now employed in having a business, you're having a sales dinner, let's say. How do you conduct yourself at that dinner? The table arrangement, how do you dress, things like that. So we think these are important cultural things for everyone to be aware of. I know things are a bit more casual than some years back, but actually I was speaking with somebody from Electric Boat, and what they were seeing is many of the engineers were very used to, especially during COVID, being sort of a t-shirt crowd and working from home. And as they start to promote them into managerial ranks, they realize that they had to brush on some of these social skills. So we start already here. We get you out of the gate quickly, hitting the ground running. There was a scuba group last year. I don't know if they're going to reconvene this year or not, but these are all things that are certainly available. And I know that the disc golf tournament, they've got new equipment to fix some of the old disc golf. I guess they call them goals or pins, I'm not quite sure. And there's a soccer game today at 4 o'clock, so 2 o'clock, I'm sorry, 2 o'clock. So please stay and watch over on Thorpe Field. A beautiful day to watch a soccer game, not too hot out there. Let's see, we very much engage with our community. One way is through the Summit Engineering Academy. we've gone to 2-week sessions, two 2-week sessions, because we have about 50 people per year, roughly 25 people per session. And it's typically high schoolers that come to that. And it gets our name out there. That's one thing that's very visible for us. We have 3 or 4 Webb students that will work as program leaders, so they get some, call it program management skills. They work with youngsters to, teach them and lead them in these various projects. And also, it's a great introduction to Webb. This year, there were 4 students who have been through that program, at some point in their high school career, so that's 15% of the class, has actually been through the Summer Engineering Academy at one point or another. And we also put on in the spring what's called Engineering Day. Last spring we had 88 students. These are for elementary and middle school students, so they're younger kids. And we introduced them. We have a number of projects that we work, typically 3 or 4 projects, hands-on projects that they work on during a morning. Actually, it's almost a full day, I think. And one is about, can they decide what kind of a boat would float, and they test it themselves. One is about wind power and how can they design something to take advantage of wind power. Another one is about a structure, so they build a bridge out of popsicles, that kind of thing. And we actually have a foundation, the Baylor Foundation C-STEP, which is Community STEM educational program, where we try to bring what we see as engineering to the community. I think the U.S. in general lags in engineering skills or more advanced math skills compared to many other countries, and it's very important that we support those and expand them. And there are foundations out there that are interested in doing and assisting with that. And so we will take our show on the road, if you will, various high schools in the area, either high schools or lower grade schools, to encourage them to think about engineering and STEM type programs. Now, facilities, there's a lot going on. When you were here in August, of course, you saw all the scaffolding. That's gone now. They haven't quite finished it. They still have some flashing they're installing up there, but almost done. The boathouse renovation, if you've been down the water, it's about halfway done. It'll be finished, we believe, primarily in October. I put here fix and bricks. We got old brick buildings, and we're doing a lot of repairs. There was the one up on the chimneys. Haberly Lab, if you walk down there, a lot of work going on there as well. The maintenance garage, a similar issue, but slightly different. That's more of a structural change we have to make. A lot of windows are going in around the buildings. Garage doors, repainting the carpenter shop. The auditorium lobby outside has to be upgraded. We're going to put in some new landscaping in various places. We do have to improve the quality of that, and the website I had mentioned. And finally, we have Motley, which is a student housing typically for upperclassmen, and that is, I think there's about 10 or 11 students in there now. It's not very well utilized, the building, and the building has some issues that need to be dealt with, age-related issues. It was built primarily in 1947. And then looking back, which is what used to be offices and a research building. At this point, it's where the Student Fitness Center is. But what's the future of that building going to be as well? So we have a number of projects that will tie in with the strategic plan that we are starting. There's a planning committee of the board, and we will be over the next 6 months, basically in May, we'll be putting a report forward to the board about the priorities on the strategic side. How do we emphasize new technologies? How do we bring new things into the curriculum? How do we deal with the long-term financial strength of Webb? Various things like that. Dealing with people, dealing with infrastructure, finances, all aspects, the academic side as well. So we will be focusing on those things, but of course, what you need in terms of your buildings depends also what do you want to do. What programs do you want to expand or emphasize compared to what you have today? Finances. Now, let's go through the discussion here. So, we have about just over 10 million in annual expenditures. Most of that is what we call operating expenses, which are routine things. Around about half of the operating expense is related to salary and personnel costs. And of course, we have about 38 people, including staff, plus the faculty. So, as in most colleges, that represents the majority, or at least half of the cost. Capital cost is all the work we're doing around campus to upgrade things, and that is something that we will have to continue to do. We have 106 students. We budget for 106 students. We actually have 105. This is all based on the budget. So just under $100,000 per student is the cost to run the operation. And actually, we run benchmarking against other universities, and that's quite competitive. Some of the other ones tend to be even up to, $130,000, $140,000 per student. So we fight scale because we are small. We have to allocate many fixed costs against over a smaller student group than in many other schools. But even then, we come up with a really competitive cost because we run lean and mean, if you will. I myself will be doing, for example, discussions with the insurance companies, whereas in a bigger school, you always have somebody that does insurance, right? So here we tend to wear 15 hats in each position of where you're employed. This year, the fees for room and board and fees are $19,500 roughly per student. And when we look at the where the revenue comes from, around 1/3 comes from fundraising. And we'll talk later about the fundraising part of it, but that's roughly so you know how much of the pie is covered by that. 20% roughly is by the room and board and fees. And miscellaneous revenue is very small. The endowment, which is, when you run an endowment, you target what you'd like to take to cover your routine expenses, and that typically is 4.25%. Some schools go to 5%, but we're a bit more conservative at 4.25%. That covers about a quarter, but as you can see, about 20% is not covered. And we typically see that over the last year or two for excess draw. Now, we actually have been very good at exceeding our budget expectations for fundraising. And in particular, we've had some very good incomings from alumni. And we'll talk later about a capital campaign that we're starting to build the endowment so the endowment can take a greater percentage routinely. But in the last year or two, we have had some excess draw to pay for all the investments. Of course, when you have a big expansion like we did with the Couch Academic Center, that is a big pull on your finances. We, of course, we took out some loans. We had a capital campaign, but we started with a $6 million loan. We're down to 1.7, sorry. So you do have to pay for those projects. The endowment has done pretty well overall. We are just over $80 million now, and the returns have been good. So one of the reasons why we can go higher than the 4.25% draw is the returns have been higher than expected. That allows us to pull a bit more. We have excess spending capacity. But it may be the case one day, and it's happened a number of times in the past, that your endowment doesn't return those kinds of numbers. In fact, in some cases in the past, in 2002, 2008, just after COVID, of course you can have substantial declines of 10, 15, 20% on the endowment. So, and then you have to be a little careful when you look at your spending patterns there. Now, room and board fees, let's talk a bit about that. You're the parents, you're paying the bills, most of you. So we charge 83% of the cost to deliver that service. And we take the allocation of the cost of people involved in it, the feeding cost, a proportionate cost based on square footage of the buildings that are used for housing, for example. And so we're 83% of that cost is charged out. And we do benchmarking against our peers. Schools like Rose-Hulman, RPI, Stevens, Harvey Mudd. Those are engineering colleges. Olin College up in Massachusetts. Not the huge engineering colleges because, of course, you can't compare small and large, but those are smaller sized ones. And also we compare against some Ivies because MIT is also a peer school in terms of choices of some students. And we tend to be, even the local schools are more expensive on the room and board. So we've identified the need to close that gap over time. Inflation today is running in the Northeast 3 to 3.5%, that kind of number. We don't know where it's going to go in the future. It depends what happens with tariffs, of course, and everything else. Of course, the Fed is watching that, and we can't guess where things will go. But we do have to be probably a bit higher than inflation, because we do need over the long term to narrow that gap a little bit. So you will be informed of that as time goes on. But we will maintain our financial promise. We have two of them. One is the full tuition scholarship, and the other one is fulfilling demonstrated need for those, or fulfilling the room and board cost for those that have a full demonstrated need, or portions of demonstrated need. And there's a whole process that runs through Emily Harris and our financial aid group to go through FAFSA and the rest of it to establish how that works. It's a very complicated process. I'll show a slide coming up next, which is an interesting thing, and we were discussing it a bit. I mentioned it this morning as well. So what we see here, it's a lot going on with this graph, but I think it's purple. I can't really tell what you call that color, or chartreuse, I don't know. So what it shows is that's the demonstrated need of students or families of students, and what we see is this year it went up to 475,000 when it had been in the low to mid 300s for the last couple of years. So that's a very big jump. We have a bit of a change in profile, both in students that have been in Webb and also that are entering Webb. One of the things that William Webb did reach out to, he wanted to have a school that was something that could be achieved by those who don't have financial means. So when he started the school in 1889, it was fully free. Tuition, room and board, everything was covered. In the 1960s and 1970s, they realized that full commitment wasn't feasible any longer, so the charges for room and board arose at that point in time. So I think we're very much doing what William Webb wanted, but there is a cost. So that increase of that purple line is what you see there. The green line is what we can provide through scholarships. And we go out and we solicit grants from organizations that are interested in this. And we've had the opportunity, for example, in 1920, 2021, you see the green line bump. We got some good grants from outside institutions. But those are not reliable. You can't always get those. So you can see for the last 5 years, we've been growing our self-funding. These are going out to develop room and board scholarships from people willing to donate larger amounts. And we have, for example, a full room and board scholarship would be 1.3 million. Yes, that's a full scholarship to support the school. You can have room and board scholarships for lower amounts. But we've been growing those figures. We have quarter scholarships, half scholarships. We've been growing that, so about 195,000 we're dispensing this year from what we call student aid from these scholarships. But it doesn't meet the full need. Now we have increased the amount because these students are able to get Pell Grants, so of course there's federal money coming in. But the amount that we can finance from our own sources and from government sources is not as good this year as it was the year prior. So there's an expectation that students might have to take out some loans, or a greater amount of loans this year. And the question will be, what will the future look like? We don't know, but certainly we will continue to grow the green line. We will continue to look for students that may need financial need, because as we said, this is in line with William Webb's mission from when we started the school. But it may be that there may be self-funding requirements in terms of loans that may be required along the way. And that has always been the case. You can see the gray bar on top is the self-funding portion. And I think some students have always taken loans out at Webb. Not to the point where you see huge amounts being taken. We're talking a few $1,000s per year that may be required, and certainly with the when you graduate, certainly ample capacity and opportunity to pay those loans back if you haven't had the opportunity to pay during your school time. Certainly if you work during summers and so on, you can avoid the need for that depending on what you're doing work-wise. One thing we will have to change though, we've always used only the FAFSA, which is a student aid application to the US government. The problem with the FAFSA, it looks like 2 years back in terms of the information it asks for. And that's not really satisfactory. We see a lot of changes over time in, say, students' families, maybe changes in employment status, things like this. And that can have a big impact on people. So we will go to the CSS profile. This is something owned by College Board. It's much more up-to-date, precise information on a family's financial status, which will enable us to better determine the amount of need and target where we can fulfill the need going to those students. So I think we set a total revenue from room and board from 105 students this year is just over $2 million, and we dispensed about $200,000 in student aid this year. So that gives you, a feeling for how much of a gap needs to be filled by those sources. I think the amount from federal funding was about $150,000. These all come together very much in the package to make Webb affordable for all of those families that do need some support and help. Giving back is something that we definitely emphasize here at Webb. The parents' discussion this morning was a little bit about starting that for, let's call it parents that are here, but the students also become very much aware of it. Next Friday is the afternoon is going to be devoted going to Wellwood, which is the estate next door. Well, now it's actually a Nassau County museum. It's a park, and because it's a park, it's a little bit run down. Nassau County doesn't have a lot of money. They don't put a lot of attention to it. So we take the afternoon off to fix it up, paint vandalized or graffiti walls, things like that. Founders Day is in May. We spend a whole afternoon fixing up the Webb campus. And we have our other types of events. I think that if you've donated to Webb before, the first week or the second week of school, we have a phone-a-thon where seniors start calling all those who donated to Webb to thank them for their giving. So we very much inculcate this idea of giving back. Over 70% of the alumni at Webb, having been given the opportunity to have this great experience here with the tuition paid for, do give back. And it's something that, and very much in terms of their capacity. So we have ranging from donors that can give millions to those that can give, especially young alumni, 100 plus a year or something like that. For young alumni wanting to buy a house and start a family, not an easy situation. So, and typically as you progress in your career, you become more senior, get the kids out of the house, college paid for, giving capacity often increases. This is the kind of life cycle that we steward here. And we have a development team very much invested in the stewardship effort. And going all the way, and I'll mention the next slide about a capital campaign, going to estate planning, an important part. So around $2.5 million per year is coming from this giving program. And it's a steady kind of number, sometimes going up to 4+ if we have some estates or something like that, and some leaner years depending on how things look. But it's a very important part. And we have in the spring, the day before homecoming, Heritage Society, which is where alumni are investing or providing for Webb in their estates, in their wills. And the students are very much running that event. They're assisting in running the kitchen, to cook the meals, to prepare the hors d'oeuvres, to prepare the desserts. Curtis Craig, I think, is our star baker, at least he is now. We had a great event in May of this last year. Running a team, I think Curtis and 3 or 4 others made a great thing. And then also the Webb chef was helping out with that. So that's very much starting the giving back at a much earlier age as well. I mentioned this campaign, or you'll hear more about this in late October and November. We're calling it Investing in Excellence. We want to focus on building the endowment. The last capital campaign, which ran from, let's see, 2015 to 2020, that one was based on building the New Couch Academic Center. And that's important to have great facilities, to have state-of-the-art facilities that people can, because students spend 90% of their, well, maybe not 90, but 75% of their time in that space. And it's important that that be a good space and something that we can show we are, investing for the future. But you also have to invest for scholarships, that means building an endowment, professorships, another way to give, and finally unrestricted giving. These are all vehicles for giving. Whenever you have a campaign, you start with what's called a silent phase, where you reach out to those that you know have ample giving capacity, and you try to sign them up, and we're well along in that. I think we are at this point well in excess of 20 million for that campaign, the silent phase of that campaign. We will set the goal after the board meeting in October. The board meeting is the 24th, so you'll hear more after that, after we set the goal and publish that. And there are many opportunities, long-term for that, including estate pledges. And we're going to have what we call a roadshow in conjunction with that. I think this is more or less the schedule. Start in Florida in January. We're going to go to the West Coast, Southern California, Bay Area, Seattle. Then we're going to go to Houston, probably the Mid-Atlantic states after that. Likely DC, Annapolis, and the Virginia Beach area. Northeast, we're going to hit Rhode Island, Connecticut. Usually we do New London there. Boston, typically up in Maine. There's an event in New York. And then finally, even our European chapter will have an event at some point along the way. Most likely either in London or Rotterdam. Those have been the places we've used in the past. So certainly you'll hear more about that. You're very much welcome if you're in any of these locations to attend and get to meet alumni community. And we often have these alumni events for connecting. We typically like to do it in the winter, and the reason for it is not because Florida is nice, but it is. But more importantly, it's where the students are working. So, for example, we have quite a few students working in the Fort Lauderdale area. We have students, of course, in Connecticut. They're up at Electric Boat in California. At NASCO in San Diego. Seattle takes a lot of students as well for internships. So we like to bring the students along with the alumni. It really helps to build community. It's the springboard for them to do their networking for the next internship or for their final job. So that's the way we run those events. So we hope to see some of you perhaps at those events. Finally, looking to the future, and this is very much, we'll go into the strategic planning that we're looking at, innovation in many areas. One thing I didn't put here, of course, is curriculum. And we are in the start point of a curriculum shift. For example, some of the projects that are now being done in junior year will likely go to senior year, and what's being done in senior year will shift to junior year. There's a program to make that happen. The faculty has been going through about a 1.5 to 2 year process to do a deep dive into what do we teach, what skills are deployed at what points, what is the right time. For example, when you do creative design, should that be as a junior in a team, or should it be in the senior year when you have more of the tools where you can apply creativity more proactively? So that's one of the reasons we're making that shift. The senior design, which is a much more, the basics of design about, how do you fit something in? What are the structural members of a ship? How do you fit the engine room into the, into the structure? How do you make sure you have a ship with the right stability and strength? Those are all more, they're more content heavy, and so those will be maybe moved forward where you get the content mastery sooner, so that when you go to the senior project, perhaps you'll have more ability to apply them creatively. So those are some of the shifts. But then there's a whole thing with the prerequisites. You have to change what you do before that. And so I think all of the students will see, and we've had some sessions with students. We haven't given the full detailed layout yet. I think some things are changing this year, but the bigger changes likely will be during the course of next year. But of course, the faculty will be laying that out to the students as time goes on. Autonomous shipping or autonomous vehicles. There's a big shift underway right now. We have two companies coming in. One is Anduril, one is Saronic. They're on the cutting edge of the defense sector. They're all about autonomous operation. Autonomous operation, to a great extent, relies on AI. There was a presentation in the library yesterday, some of you attended that, where Professor Boyd explained a bit about what does it mean, how does it work, what are the different types, what are the great things about it, what are the risks with it. So we have a grant from Diane Green, she was the graduation speaker last June. 1.5 years ago, she was the graduation speaker. A commitment for a grant to have every Webb capable in AI, in the right use, to know the tools, how to apply the tools. And so we have to nail down the grant now. We still work in the development phase, get it written out, and then start to, you have to start buying some equipment for that. We have actually a space already allocated in the computer lab next to the innovation lab, where we could start to bring in some equipment and materials that would be specifically for that kind of a thing, and then to bring it into the curriculum very much, right? When any professor gives a course, how do you use it? What can you do? What can you apply? But more importantly, also, what not to do. So, for example, it shouldn't be that I don't need to learn the basics of engineering because there's a module on Google where I can apply it and not learn how to engineer a beam. If you did that, then you wouldn't know when it didn't get done right. And you're still responsible as an engineer for the result of what you design. So you better know when it's doing a thing behind in a black box, how it's producing it, and whether it's right or not. And there are ways of doing that, of course, to develop those things. And then finally, sustainability, another innovation area. It's very much, this is a long-term program for the industry, of course. And I think there was more energy behind sustainability a few years ago. I sense a little bit, when you read what's going on, at least in the shipping industry, some pullback starting to occur. That there's worries that, especially in Europe now, which was very much leading in sustainability, now Europe has to focus on other things, defense. Russia, Ukraine, building up their defense forces, their tanks and planes and armies and so on. And perhaps when you start to focus on those things, sustainability maybe is not quite as high on the list. And that's a worry that I have about the direction of things. Certainly in the US, we've taken a big step backwards. I think very unfortunately so. We have a huge demand for electricity. It's only growing leaps and bounds, and yet we're dismantling wind farms. It doesn't make sense to me. I think decarbonization is happening. It's just happening now at a pace where it's dictated by market forces more closely than by programs that support it. It's more bottom-up forces, less top-down forces. And I did expect that shipping would be very much a top-down push. That's what the International Maritime Organization has organized. It's a very strong development program, but it's very much top-down. And if you remove the top-down push, will there be enough bottom-up push based on economics only? That might be questionable. So that's still to be fought out. I think there's a big session coming in October at the IMO, and they will figure out what the plan is going forwards. But it's becoming, I think, more contentious today than it was a year or two ago. I mentioned the strategic plan review. That is something that we will certainly be focusing on. And we have what's called an industry advisory group that will be participating as well. So we go to the industry players, whether it's yachts, whether it's naval ships, commercial ships, transportation sector, and say, what do you need from a school like ours? What skill sets do you need? We're a bit constrained on how many people we can push through, but we can change how we develop them in terms of teamwork, in terms of leadership, in terms of coursework, maybe programming languages, all those things. And if we want to emphasize, or if the industry feels that something is needed that we don't provide today, then we have to make that shift. So that's very much a strategic plan review, because then we may have to reallocate resources from where we otherwise would have to do it. But the curriculum review is very much done in conjunction with this industry advisory group, but certainly in the future of Webb, it's very much interrelated with the direction that it's going there, the industry and education, more generally speaking. And finally, I mentioned, of course, about the U.S. maritime industry, the reprioritization and emphasis going on. You may have heard a number of major Korean shipbuilders are making initiatives to invest in the U.S. in existing facilities, to grow U.S. facilities. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't seen more specific funding from the government to push those initiatives forward, because I do think that you do need more than just industry sponsorship. I do think you need more governmental funding. And certainly when you look at all other nations that lead in shipbuilding, there has been a strong governmental support program to get to that stage. And by not investing, that's a choice that one makes. And certainly, I mean, Europe got out of shipbuilding many years ago. The US got out of it for economic reasons as well, since the Second World War. Even until the 1970s was much more competitive. But there were things like construction differential subsidies, there were tax preference programs. Those, once you stop all of those, it became relatively uneconomic to build in the US, other than what's called the Jones Act, coastal trade, and naval shipbuilding. So that's more or less what we're left with today. So to restore the US to competitive international shipbuilding is a big ask. It can be done, I think, but it does need a lot of investment. And I'm just a little bit worried that if the government doesn't put sufficient resources into it, it's not going to get the result that it expects. But this remains to be seen. I think Congress has plenty of things to fight over, this probably being not the highest on their priorities at this point in time. But we certainly remain hopeful that, in fact, we will move forward with that. Okay, I think this is all that I had to say about Webb. We certainly have some time now before lunch. I think lunch starts at 11:30, so I'm happy to field any questions on any topic from anyone. Okay. All right, well, I will be around during the day, so happy to answer any questions you have during the day. And until then, enjoy the day, enjoy lunch, root for the team, and listen to the presentation. I think it's at 1 or 1:30 about winter work experiences from students. We're going to have a very good look on what winter work looks like for those freshman parents who haven't seen what that's about before. Thank you very much.